And I'm Mark.
And we wrote the music for Scattered Verse. Mark and I both went to the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, which is where we met each other, and we studied music composition.
I did more film and video game music, and Meg did more musical theater work. After we graduated, I joined a community group named the Philly Game Mechanics. It's a group of local game developers and game enthusiasts, basically. And I ended up meeting Tony there.
Yeah, I remember seeing the beginning of the project when Mark was he created the music for the opening theme, and the artwork blew me away. It was so cool.
The first time I saw Scattered Verse, Tony showcased an early demo of it at one of the Philly Game Mechanics meets, and it was pretty captivating to begin with. His art style really was something that drew me to the game, but I saw a lot of potential with the use of poetry and kind of the educational aspect of the game. And I thought between the two of those, there'd be a lot of room for music to do a lot of speaking here. And so it was immediately something I was drawn to. And I started talking to him that night. A little bit later, we got Meg involved. And a little bit after that, now we're done. This one was interesting because it was the first time Meg and I actually worked on a game together. We've worked together. I've brought her on some film projects. She's had me on some musical theater projects, as well as a whole pop album.
In all of those collaborations together, they were much different than this one because one of us was kind of taking the reins. It was like, hey, I want to bring you on to this, but I have a specific purpose for you doing this. This was a lot more challenging because we were both equal parts of this project.
And that's where Tony got involved too. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. Tony definitely had a lot to say about the music in terms of what he wanted and different feedback like that. But I think a lot of times the largest influence, the largest provider of feedback was the art itself, the poems themselves. That was something we definitely went back and forth with a lot. But I think even as Tony might have been pulling a poem and putting in a different one, the art that we were looking at was a big influence early on that kind of provided some guidance as to what we should be trying to convey with the music.
And since Tony was an actual musician, that made it easier, but also it made it more challenging because he had a lot of
specific
instructions to give us about the music that we were writing, which really helped us navigate.
The poems were an interesting angle because obviously there's a whole lot of influence it could have on everything from the music to the mechanics to the art itself. There was a lot of back and forth of tossing ideas at each other and seeing what kind of stuck.
A poem can be about one thing and the actual meaning of it is entirely different. And sometimes we're able to kind of dissect that. Other times it kind of dies with the poet because everybody interprets it in a different way. So that's what made writing music for it challenging, but also not challenging because we were able to interpret it in the way that we wanted to. I may have interpreted it different than Mark did, and that's what kind of created these contrasts and these intertwining themes that I felt like represented Tony's artwork as well as the poetry, at least to us.
At the end of the day, we definitely just took a swing at what the poems said to us. Obviously, we're not speaking for the poets or for any definitive meaning, but we're just trying to enhance the experience the player could be getting from these levels, from this art, from the game as a whole. For a minimalist story like this, obviously there aren't specific highs and lows to write to, but the story itself still has, narrative beats. The big thing that comes into how it's experienced is the order of events that occur. The player has a lot of autonomy in regards to choosing when they'll, travel down this path versus that path. And it definitely made it an interesting challenge to kind of anticipate what emotions the player might be feeling at a given moment. But it's one of those times we use Tony's art style and the poems themselves as a good source of guidance for what the music should be trying to convey or support.
Probably Darkbird. Tony really gassed me up for that one, and we sent him a demo. I just improv'd a short melody over a chord progression that we had that I hadn't initially planned on using for vocals, and we sent Tony the demo, and he was like, "That's it. Let's keep the voice in. Like, let's make it happen."
The Darkbird theme was something Tony was definitely looking forward to in terms of the emotional potential of it. And immediately upon hearing the demo, he was floored for sure. You did great with that. And for me, I think where we ended up with Fruit Gathering's track was really something. That was one of the ones I liked a lot. The upward direction and all those kind of levels, what Tony called the exploration area, was definitely a very interesting sort of idea for what we were aiming for. Tony talked a lot about the idea that the scientific pursuit eventually reaches a point where human understanding might be kind of tapped out. So what happens next was basically the prompt he posed. And so Fruit Gathering was kind of the culmination of all of that energy, that pursuit in itself. And I definitely was very happy with where we wound up for that. When that violin melody comes in, that's definitely one of the highlights.
Yeah, it was almost like poetic the way that it took us so long to get that one done, because we it's like we tapped out, like in the same way that Tony was talking about the theme or like his prompt. It was so new for both of us, like working on something like that we kind of reached a plateau for a minute, and then once that violin melody came through, everything started falling into place. Right now, Scattered Verse is out on iOS, and it will be available to Android users very soon.
Meg and I have definitely been talking about getting the soundtrack together, maybe extending it a little bit more and doing a whole release of that. So anyone that's looking forward to that can definitely be keeping an eye out. There's a lot of potential for the music in terms of, we talked about something like a study album or a study playlist. We talked about even doing a piano arrangement. So there's different ideas bouncing around, the first of which really is just getting the soundtrack itself out.